Good morning, everybody. In the early days of World War II, it was unclear how successful Germany would be as it attacked France and so on, and Germany was pretty successful. And on this date, June 4 in 1940, was the end of the evacuation at Dunkirk, when the British Army, with French and other allies, managed to escape across the English Channel. When World War I ended, the French built the Maginot Line, that dark red line with the border with Germany, a series of fortifications and so on. But if you look north of that bold line, you see where it's not bold, and that's because the Ardennes forest was there. And here's a picture of that. So French war planners didn't think the Germans would go through the Ardennes, so they didn't really fortify it. But the Germans did, and that in itself is quite a story. So September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland, but then for Britain and France it was what was known as the phony war, because nothing really happened until the spring of 1940, so some months later. So Germany invaded the Netherlands, Belgium, and France. Here you can see the map of where all that happened. Blitzkrieg, of course, is the name we have for lightning war, and this close-up shows how three German armies were heading toward what became the Dunkirk evacuation site. And it became clear that things were not going well for the Allies and they would have to evacuate. So why Dunkirk? Well, here you can see it. It's on the English Channel, but it had port facilities and it had a really big beach. So that was one reason they picked that spot. So the Germans got closer and closer. You can see they captured Boulogne on the left. They were moving in on Calais, just north of that, to the west of Dunkirk. And then the Germans decided to slow down the tanks, the panzers. They didn't think they could make it in the muck, and there was concern about flanking and supplies, and this is even today argued by military historians. Why did the Germans stop the panzers? And one of the reasons was Hermann Göring, pictured here, promised that the Luftwaffe could do what it needed to do to be successful, but the RAF, the Royal Air Force, had intercepted German radio information on where the German Air Force would be, so that RAF was able to respond very effectively. So here's George VI going into Westminster Abbey for a special service. There was a prayer day in Britain because people realized things were very tense. And then part of the drama of the Dunkirk evacuation is how they lined up all these soldiers, the Brits, the French, Belgians, other allies, to sort of wait their turn for these ships to come. And at the same time, the Germans were bombing the daylights out of the Dunkirk port. So the RAF's assignment was to try to protect the troops and so on and so forth. And there was quite a lot of fighting in the air as part of the Dunkirk story. And in general, the RAF was successful, although they did lose quite a few men and planes, but the Germans lost more. So our event is June 4. Here you can see the situation as the last guys were taken off the beach. The whole operation took some time, very, very dramatic, and part of the drama was the different routes the ships used to go from England over to France to evacuate people. So there were about 700 ships that were used, and almost half of them were what they called the small boats. That's part of the drama of the Dunkirk story, too. There were destroyers and cruisers and tugboats and so on, but these little boats had a big part of it. Well, the world was captivated by this. Here's a headline from our country, but the fact that the British Army was able to escape, and Allies too, was a big deal. So maybe you've seen this movie, Dunkirk, from 2017. There have been lots of film versions of this, specials and so on. But if you go to Dunkirk, you can see some of the wreckage from that, just like you can up and down the whole coast of France from The fighting in World War II, a reminder of that very tense time in 1940.